Right now, I do want to pop up this live look over the White House at this hour as President Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address in history last night. That speech lasting about an hour and 48 minutes. Trump warned it would be a lengthy one, as there was a lot to discuss in his first official State of the Union of his second term in office. Now, the focal point was the economy and affordability, but the topic of Iran and a nuclear deal also having comments as well.
As president, I will make peace wherever I can, but I will never hesitate to confront threats to America wherever we must. That's why in a breakthrough operation last June, the United States military obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program with an attack on Iranian soil known as Operation Midnight Hammer. For decades, it had been the policy of the United States never to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
So this morning, Iran is actually pushing back against President Trump's remarks ahead of tomorrow's talks between the U.S. and Iran, once again happening in Geneva. Two Iranian officials calling those remarks, quote, big lies, but also explaining negotiations could lead to an agreement only through, quote, honorable diplomacy. Those comments as the Pentagon builds up its largest force of American warships and aircraft in the Middle East in decades, and that includes 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. President Trump has continuously warned of potential military action against Iran if talks over its nuclear program fall apart. Right now, I want to bring in Javed Ali, Associate Professor of Practice at the University of Michigan's Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. He's also worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. Thank you so much, Javed Ali, for being here with us, as always.
Josh, always nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I want to start by talking overall about what we can expect tomorrow, because we know that those talks are taking place, and this is going to be that third round expected to once again be indirect talks. So when you look at that overall and you think about Geneva being the spot once again, what does that all kind of say?
So, Josh, here we are now about roughly a month into this latest round of negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. As you mentioned, we've had 2 other meetings, the first one in Oman, and you and I talked about that. Then going back about a week, the second meeting in Geneva, we also talked about that then. And tomorrow we're going to have now the third round of meetings in Geneva. The mechanics of these discussions, as we've also talked about in the past, are a little unusual, where both sides aren't actually sitting at the table together. One side comes in, the Omani foreign minister sort of serves as the intermediary, and then the other side comes in, and that Omani foreign minister then passes the discussions from the side that was in the room before. So that's how it's going to play out, I think, tomorrow. But even from the clip that you showed from President Trump's remarks at the State of the Union last night, he's leaving open the possibility of diplomacy to get to a deal. But as we all know, there is this significant U.S. military buildup in the region, and so it seems like the White House is still on this dual track approach of putting pressure on Iran, demonstrably showing the significant U.S. buildup that's now encircling Iran, at least from the air and naval resources, but still having these diplomatic talks. And which of these 2 tracks will there actually be results? That's the thing that nobody knows the answer to.
We also know that we heard from President Trump as he was speaking, and he's mentioned this several times, but that he has so many options there. We're talking limited strikes, a broader campaign. Can you kind of explain our understanding of really what the difference is there between the two?
So with the significant amount of U.S. military resources in the region, 2 carrier battle groups, and in addition to those, then there's about 200 planes roughly split between both carriers. There's probably several hundred other planes already in the region at the different air bases in Jordan, in Turkey, in Qatar, in the Al-Udeid Air Base, which is the biggest U.S. base in the region, and on and on. So there's a significant amount of resources, and then the ships that have their firepower as well, with tomahawks and other land-based weapons that they could fire. So with all of that capability, I would have to believe over the past month or so, the Pentagon, either through the deliberate National Security Council process or another process, has presented President Trump with a whole menu of options. And as you indicated, some of those options could be more on the lighter side, so not a full-blown campaign that lasts for days or weeks and tries to hit a broad scope of targets, dozens if not hundreds over that period of time, but maybe one of the options is something very limited, very narrow, perhaps something that looks like Midnight Hammer from last June, may not be nuclear facilities, but something like that. And on the other side, there's the heavy option that, as I said, could be very extensive. And that is probably where Iran would retaliate significantly if the U.S. picks that heavy option.
One thing that's interesting is just days ago, we heard that the U.S. is ordering those non-essential embassy staff and families to leave Beirut. Does that tell us anything? Is there anything to read into that as far as the situation with Iran?
So over the past year, with the tension between Iran and Israel, now Iran and the U.S., we've seen these ordered departures of non-essential personnel from different bases or locations in the region. Going back a month, I think there were non-essential folks who were asked to leave on military bases. I think Al-Udeid and maybe the one in Bahrain. But now we're seeing ordered departure of non-essential personnel from the embassy in Lebanon. And that, I would have to believe, is based on the potential threat of Hezbollah retaliation against the U.S. embassy or U.S. personnel or U.S. interest in Lebanon in the event of a conflict between Iran and the U.S. And we haven't seen Hezbollah come to Iran's aid yet over the past couple of years, but Israel has also hit Hezbollah really hard going back to September 2024. And maybe that's one of the reasons why. But I have to believe there was either intelligence or just out of an abundance of caution, that decision was made to thin out the presence in Lebanon, because that is in Hezbollah's backyard, and potentially they could, if so ordered or directed, they could try to attack U.S. interests there.
It's also important to note we haven't really heard much about Hamas or Hezbollah in general there. The Houthis, a lot of that discussion has kind of stopped over the past several months. So we'll kind of see how that factors into all of this. But also want to talk about Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because we know that he has a trip planned, as far as we still know, for this weekend to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, the prime minister there of Israel. So does that tell us anything? Is there anything to read into that trip specifically?
So based on what comes out of the meeting tomorrow, then Secretary Rubio's trip may help sort of guide us in terms of what the next step is. Now, again, if we hear tomorrow that these talks don't lead to anything productive and they've collapsed and both sides have gotten frustrated with each other, then potentially the trip that Secretary Rubio makes is to then meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu and perhaps the military commanders and the Israeli Defense Forces to plan for the military campaign that might be ordered by President Trump. So that's one possibility. On the other side, if the talks are productive tomorrow, then maybe what Secretary Rubio will do when he goes to Israel is talk about how to keep sort of the diplomatic options open in the region and keep the countries comfortable who don't want to see conflict happen between the U.S. and Israel and Iran, because their interests are going to be affected. And from the possibility of Iranian attacks or the economic and commercial interests they have with Iran. So it could go in two different directions, I think, but we're going to have to wait and see how tomorrow's meeting goes before we have a clear read what Secretary Rubio is going to try to achieve.
My last question for you here. Realistically, do we expect much to come from tomorrow's talks? Because as far as I understand, these are once again going to be indirect. So we're not seeing officials there from the U.S. and from Iran actually meet face to face. They are meeting through mediators. So anything that could actually come out of it.
Well, this is where it gets so hard to know, Josh, kind of the decision making both on the U.S. side and the Iranian side. So how much patience does President Trump and the White House have to let these talks continue if there still aren't the prospect for a realistic deal that satisfies all the U.S. conditions and demands? And that's going to take some hard negotiating to get to. And at the same time, even though the U.S. has built up this significant military presence now in the region, it has also given Iran, on the flip side, more time to prepare. And I would have to believe the Iranians are, in the event of a military campaign by the U.S. and or Israel, there are a whole list of options the Iranians are now preparing for in response to being attacked. And that is where things could get very dicey and escalate quickly out of control. So diplomacy may stall out, but if we get into a military campaign, then both sides are going to probably hit each other or try and hit each other as hard as they can.
All right, Javed Ali, as always, we appreciate your insight here. I know you got to get going, but anything you want to add, anything we missed here before I let you go?
Yeah, it's another tense moment, Josh. I think we're going to have to wait and see how tomorrow goes. But if the talks really do collapse and the White House says, we're not meeting anymore, then I think we are probably in the run up to seeing the beginnings of a military campaign. And again, it may start off small or it could off the bat go very heavy. It's unclear how that's going to go.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on it. Again, those talks happening tomorrow over in Geneva, that third round of talks after we saw the talks in Geneva last week. So, Javed Ali, thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. We definitely appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks, Josh.
And I want to take you out to this post here from the State Department. They posted a clip from President Trump's State of the Union. Of course, we played for you some of the comments a bit earlier, but it says, President Trump on Iran, my preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy, but one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror to have a nuclear weapon. We have to be strong. It's called peace through strength. Again, as I mentioned, those talks set to take place tomorrow in Geneva. Once again, expected to be indirect talks. We're not talking about the U.S. and Iran sitting face to face and having a discussion. Of course, that could always change, but we'll make sure to keep you updated, as always, here on Live Now from Fox.